They walk among us, polished, confident, magnetic, the kind of people who light up a room the moment they enter it. They know exactly what to say, when to say it, and how to make you feel like you're the only person who matters. You don't see the danger coming because at first they seem flawless, successful, charming, intelligent, maybe even kind. But slowly the mask slips. Their charm begins to sting. Their compliments become criticism. Their warmth turns into ice. And one day you realize something horrifying. This person was never really looking at you. They were only ever looking at their reflection through you. Carl Jung once said, "The greatest tragedy of the human soul is to become possessed by the image it wishes to project." And that's exactly what a narcissist is. Someone possessed not by demons, but by their own illusion. To understand the narcissist, you must look beneath the mask, to the emptiness they're hiding. Beneath their confidence lies deep insecurity. Beneath their control lies fear. And beneath their arrogance lies shame. Ancient, buried shame they'll do anything to escape. Jung believed that every human being wears a persona, a mask designed to face the world. But while most of us can take it off when we're alone, the narcissist cannot. For them, the mask is their face. They've forgotten who they were before they built it. That's why narcissists crave attention the way drowning men crave air. Their entire existence depends on validation, compliments, admiration, power, control. Because when no one's watching, they begin to crumble inside. The silence reminds them of who they really are, fragile, frightened, and incomplete. This is where the terror of narcissism begins. You see, narcissists aren't just selfish, they are starving. Emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. Their ego is like a black hole. No matter how much you give, it's never enough. They need people not to connect with, but to feed from. Jung called this psychic feeding, the act of using others to sustain one's false self. It's why every relationship with a narcissist eventually feels like an emotional drain. You start full of love, excitement, hope, but end up empty, anxious, and unsure of who you are. At first, they idealize you. They shower you with attention, empathy, affection. You think, "I've never felt this seen before." But then, the switch flips. Suddenly, everything you do is wrong. You're too emotional, too distant, too demanding. You start apologizing for things you never did. You start shrinking, walking on eggshells, wondering how the person who once adored you now looks at you with contempt. That's not an accident. That's the cycle. Idealize, devalue, discard. It's the psychological feeding loop that keeps the narcissist alive. Why do they do this? Because they can't love. Not in the way most people understand it. Love requires vulnerability. And to be vulnerable, you have to face your own shadow. But the narcissist's entire identity is built on denying that shadow. Jung called the shadow the dark side of our psyche, the part that holds our pain, fear, guilt, and insecurity. It's everything we repress or hide. Most people learn to face it, integrate it, and grow from it. But narcissists refuse. They bury it so deep that it begins to rot. And that decay seeps into everything they touch. Instead of facing their darkness, they project it onto others. If they feel weak, they'll call you weak. If they feel insecure, they'll accuse you of jealousy. If they feel shame, they'll shame you first. Every insult they throw is really a confession they'll never admit. And here is the twisted part. They don't even realize they're redoing it. They've spent so long pretending that the mask is real that the truth no longer exists for them. That's why Jung described narcissism as a form of possession. Not by an external force, but by their own ego. They've become enslaved to the very image they created. You see, the narcissist's greatest fear isn't rejection. It's exposure. The moment someone sees behind their mask, they panic. They'll lash out, manipulate, lie, anything to protect the illusion. Because if that illusion breaks, so does their entire identity. This is why they control so fiercely. They can't afford to lose the spotlight. They need to be right, admired, feared. Anything but ordinary. Ordinary feels like death to them, and yet, despite all their power plays, they're deeply fragile. Their ego is made of glass, beautiful, reflective, but easy to shatter. One small criticism can send them spiraling. One act of defiance can make them rage. You'll see the mask crack for just a second, and what you'll glimpse behind it will terrify you. A lost, desperate child begging to be enough. That's the secret Jung tried to reveal, that narcissists aren't monsters by nature. They are people who've become trapped in their own defense mechanisms. Their arrogance is a shield, their cruelty, a cry for control, their manipulation, an act of survival. But survival comes at a price. They can never feel peace. Because peace requires acceptance, and acceptance requires truth. And the narcissist cannot face the truth of who they are. So remember this. The narcissist doesn't need your hate. They need your absence. Because what destroys a narcissist isn't confrontation, it's indifference. When you stop feeding their illusion, when you stop giving your energy to their performance, they lose their audience. And without an audience, their mask starts to crack on its own. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." For narcissists, that's the tragedy. They will never see their own unconscious. But for you, that's the power. Because once you see the pattern, you'll never fall for it again. You'll stop mistaking charm for character. You'll stop confusing validation with love. And you'll start recognizing that real strength doesn't come from being seen. It comes from seeing yourself. No one is born a narcissist. They're made. Forged in silence, molded by neglect, and polished by pain that was never allowed to speak. Carl Jung once said, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parents." And this is where the story of every narcissist begins, not in arrogance, but in emptiness. Picture this. A child who learned early that love must be earned. That affection isn't given freely, but traded for achievement, obedience, beauty, perfection. Every smile from a parent becomes a transaction. Every hug becomes a test. And slowly, the child learns the most dangerous lesson of all. I am only valuable when I perform. In Jungian psychology, this is the birth of the false self. The child builds a mask, a persona, to win approval, to survive emotionally. But beneath the mask, the real self, the soft and vulnerable core, starts to suffocate. At first, it works. The child becomes impressive, talented, confident, admired. But deep inside, there's an unspoken terror. What if they stop loving me? What if they see the real me and walk away? That fear never leaves. It grows. It evolves. And one day it becomes a personality. That's the tragedy behind the narcissist. They're not truly proud. They're terrified. Terrified of being invisible, of being ordinary, of being unworthy. Jung called this the wounded archetype, a fragment of the psyche that remains stuck in childhood pain. When that wound isn't healed, the adult learns to hide it under layers of ego. They build an empire of control around a child who never felt safe. Every narcissist carries a silent child inside them, a child who once cried for love and was met with indifference. But instead of crying again, that child learned to dominate, to control, to demand. Because somewhere along the way they realized, if I can't be loved, I'll be feared. That's how a wound becomes a weapon. In Jungian terms, this is called ego inflation. It's when the ego, instead of integrating with the rest of the psyche, becomes swollen, disconnected, godlike. It begins to see itself as the center of everything. The narcissist doesn't just want admiration. They need it to exist. It's like oxygen for a fractured soul. Without it, they begin to suffocate. But here's where the paradox lies. The very thing they seek, Love, validation, connection is the one thing they cannot sustain. Because to truly love, you must be able to step outside yourself. You must see others as real, separate beings, not as mirrors. And that's what the narcissist can't do. They don't see people. They see reflections. If you reflect admiration, you're good. If you reflect criticism, you're dangerous. In both cases, you're not real to them, just a projection of their inner world. Jung warned about this kind of possession, when a person becomes enslaved by an archetype, in this case, the God complex. The narcissist believes they are untouchable, special, chosen. But deep down, it's just the wounded child in royal clothes, shouting, "Look at me, please look at me." Let's go deeper. Why do some people, even with painful childhoods, grow strong and empathetic, while others become narcissists? Jung's answer: integration. Healthy people eventually face their shadow, their fears, insecurities, guilt, and pain. They accept them, they heal. But narcissists split. They separate the light from the dark. They reject everything that feels weak, soft, or imperfect. They bury it in the unconscious and pretend it doesn't exist. But what we repress never disappears. It grows stronger in the dark. It begins to control us from behind the curtain. Jung said, "What you resist persists." And the narcissist resists everything human: vulnerability, empathy, humility. So it persists, and it consumes them. Their smile becomes a performance. Their confidence becomes armor. Their relationships become power struggles. And though they seem invincible, they're constantly fighting an invisible war. The war against their own reflection. Here's something terrifying. Narcissism isn't just a personality disorder. It's a defense mechanism gone rogue. It's the mind saying, "I'll never feel that pain again," and building a fortress so thick that no one, not even love, can get in. That's why they sabotage every deep relationship, because intimacy means exposure, and exposure means the possibility of rejection. They crave closeness, yet fear it. They pull you near, only to push you away. It's not logic, it's survival. But deep inside, behind all the manipulation and control, there's still that broken child, still waiting for someone to love them without conditions. Jung believed that every neurosis, every dysfunction, is a call to consciousness, the soul's way of saying, "Wake up, face the truth." But narcissists never answer that call. They silence it with distractions, status, pleasure, dominance, anything that keeps them from feeling small again. So when you look at a narcissist, don't just see the monster, see the wound beneath the armor, but don't try to heal it, because only they can, and most never will. The terrifying truth is, narcissism isn't just about superiority, it's about survival. They are people who've built a castle to protect themselves from pain, and then forgot there was ever a world beyond its walls. And in that castle they rule, alone, admired, and utterly empty. Because in Jung's words, the one who looks outside dreams, the one who looks inside awakens. The narcissist never looks inside, and so they spend their entire life dreaming. A dream called perfection. There's a reason narcissists are so dangerous. They don't just manipulate your actions, they manipulate your perception of reality. And Carl Jung was one of the first psychologists to explain how they do it. Jung believed that every human being has a shadow, the hidden, unconscious part of the psyche that holds everything we deny or reject about ourselves. Our jealousy, greed, fear, rage, and shame all live there. Most people never confront their shadow. They push it down, pretending to be good, kind, and in control. But narcissists, they weaponize it. When you meet a narcissist, the first thing you feel is fascination. They're magnetic, confident, articulate, charming. They say exactly what you've been waiting to hear. You don't realize it yet, but they're mirroring you, copying your desires, your values, your emotional language. To Jung, this is projection manipulation. Narcissists study you until they understand your light, what you love, what you fear, what you want to believe about yourself. And then they become it. It's not seduction in the traditional sense. It's psychological possession. They step into your mind, wear your ideals like a costume, and convince you that you've found your missing piece. But here's the twist. Once they've mirrored your light, they begin to project their darkness onto you. Suddenly you start doubting yourself. You start apologizing more. You start feeling guilty for things you didn't do. That's not coincidence. That's gaslighting. It's one of the narcissist's most terrifying powers. Jung would explain gaslighting as an unconscious exchange of shadows. The narcissist projects everything they hate about themselves, their weakness, insecurity, shame, into you. And because you're empathic, self-aware, or emotionally open, you absorb it. You start carrying the weight of their shadow without realizing it. Think about that. They don't deal with their pain. You do. They don't feel guilt. You do. They offload their unconscious darkness into your psyche. And the moment you start reacting to it, with confusion, anger, or self-doubt, they say, "See? You're the problem." It's not manipulation on the surface. It's psychological possession. Jung wrote that when you refuse to face your own shadow, you force others to live it for you. And that's what narcissists do. They outsource their darkness. But there's something even more terrifying. The longer you stay near a narcissist, the more your identity begins to dissolve. They isolate you, not always physically, but mentally. They rewrite your memories, twist your values, and gradually convince you that your emotions are untrustworthy. Jung would call this ego fragmentation. It's like they open a crack in your psyche and start whispering into it. You're too sensitive. You're overreacting. No one else would put up with you. And little by little, your inner voice, your intuition, gets quieter. Until one day, you can't tell if you're thinking for yourself or thinking for them. This is where Jung's concept of the shadow possession becomes crucial. He said that when you refuse to confront darkness consciously, it takes over unconsciously. In other words, the narcissist doesn't just control your behavior. They control your inner world. They feed off the chaos they create inside you. Because confusion is power. If you don't trust your own mind, you'll start relying on theirs. And that's the goal. That's how they dominate. Not through force, but through distortion. You might ask, why would anyone want that kind of control? Because control is the only thing that makes the narcissist feel safe. Beneath their grandiosity lies deep insecurity, the terror of being exposed. By controlling your mind, they avoid facing their own. They become puppet masters, not because they love power, but because they fear vulnerability. They need you to reflect their illusion of superiority. You must remain weak for them to feel strong. But here's where Jung offers hope. He said, when you bring the unconscious to light, it loses its power over you. Once you see the manipulation, the spell starts to break, because the narcissist's entire game depends on invisibility, on you not realizing what's happening. Awareness is the antidote. When you catch them gaslighting you, don't argue, observe. When they twist your words, don't defend, detach. Because the moment you stop feeding their illusion, they lose control. And that's when their greatest fear surfaces, exposure. Here's the truth Jung understood better than anyone. The narcissist's power isn't in their strength. It's in your confusion. Once clarity returns, they collapse. Their manipulation only works in the dark, and the second you shine light on it, their entire mask begins to crack. You start remembering who you are. You reclaim your thoughts, your emotions, your truth. That's why Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Because the moment you reconnect with that truth, you become untouchable. No gaslighting can shake you. No projection can define you. No illusion can trap you. You step out of their shadow, and they fade. Because in the end, the most terrifying truth about narcissists is this. They don't fear losing you. They fear losing control of you. Carl Jung once said, Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. At first, that sounds harsh, almost unfair. Why should your pain, your manipulation, your heartbreak be about you? But Jung wasn't blaming the victim. He was revealing something far deeper, the psychological mirror that every narcissist holds up to the people around them. When you fall under the spell of a narcissist, you aren't just seeing them, you're seeing you. The parts of yourself you've never fully met. The parts you hide, deny, or repress. That's why the connection feels magnetic. It's not just emotional attraction, it's psychic recognition. The narcissist embodies your shadow, your unacknowledged hunger for power, validation, admiration, control. And that's why their manipulation cuts so deep. Because they don't just wound you externally, they awaken your internal conflict. This is the terrifying truth Jung uncovered. You can't fully escape the narcissist until you confront what they represent inside you. Let's be clear. This doesn't mean you're like them. It means they reflect what's unhealed in you. For example, if you crave approval, the narcissist becomes a god. If you fear abandonment, they become your test. If you need to be seen, they become your mirror. But when you integrate those needs, when you learn to meet them yourself, their power dissolves. They can no longer feed on you, because what they were consuming wasn't your weakness, it was your self-ignorance. That's why Jung believed awareness is the most powerful form of protection. Once you see the game, you stop playing it. Once you recognize the mask, it loses its magic. And that's when something incredible happens. You begin to see through all masks. You start noticing manipulation not just in relationships but in media, politics, culture. You see how narcissism has become a collective epidemic, how society itself has started rewarding performance over authenticity, charm over character, and ego over empathy. Jung warned about this. He said that when people lose connection with their inner selves, they project their darkness outward. The narcissist is just a magnified reflection of a culture that worships image and ignores depth. So when you heal yourself, when you integrate your shadow, you're not just freeing yourself from one person. You're breaking the spell of an entire system built on illusion. But here's the catch. Healing from a narcissist isn't about revenge or winning. It's about reclaiming your soul. It starts in silence, in the quiet, after the chaos. When the noise fades and you're left with nothing but yourself, that's when true transformation begins. At first, it feels like emptiness, like you've lost everything. Your identity, your direction, your trust. But Jung would tell you that emptiness is sacred. It's not destruction. It's space. Space where the real you can finally emerge. Because here's the truth. Narcissists don't destroy your worth. They destroy your illusions. They expose what was built on dependency and fantasy. They force you to confront your deepest truth, that you are already whole. You just forgot. That realization is terrifying because it means responsibility. It means no one is coming to save you. But also, no one needs to. You have the power to rebuild yourself from the inside out. That's Jung's final lesson. You don't fight the narcissist by outsmarting them. You transcend them. You rise above their level of consciousness. You stop engaging in their battlefield of ego, and instead, you become the observer, calm, centered, untouchable. They can lie, project, manipulate, but none of it reaches you, because you've detached from the illusion that you ever needed their validation. And that's the ultimate revenge, indifference born from awareness. Because when you stop reacting, you stop feeding the fire. When you stop fighting for their approval, you reclaim your energy. When you stop trying to prove your worth, you discover it was never lost. At this point, the narcissist fades, not because they've changed, but because you have. You've stopped orbiting their gravity. You've stepped into your own center. You've reclaimed your light. And that's when the true power returns. Quiet, steady, grounded. Not the power to control others, but the power to remain yourself, no matter what others do. Jung believed that was the highest form of strength, to be whole within oneself. So, if you've survived a narcissist, understand this. You are not broken. You are being refined. They didn't destroy your light. They revealed it. You've been through hell, yes. But now you've seen the fire and realized you were never meant to burn. You were meant to illuminate. If this message spoke to you, if it made you feel seen, understood, and stronger, then don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Because someone out there right now is still trapped in the dark, and your courage, your healing, might be the light that helps them find their way out.